could you help me carry that inside? Her voice floated through the open doorway, half command, half invitation. Thomas Avery paused, adjusting the boxed headboard against his shoulder, sweat glinting along his jaw. The woman in front of him stood barefoot on the wooden porch, one hand holding back the screen door, the other wrapped around a ceramic coffee mug. She was young and striking. The blue dress she wore, short, barely brushing mid-thigh, clung gently to her curves in the morning light. Thin straps rested against her shoulders, revealing soft skin kissed by the South Carolina sun. Her hair was pulled up in a lazy knot, a few strands falling around her cheekbones. She didn't look put together, but she didn't need to. "You're Maya Williams?" he asked, his voice low, steady. She nodded, smirking slightly. "Unless you're delivering to another girl with wild hair and questionable fashion choices before 9 a.m. Thomas allowed himself the faintest smile. "Delivery for bedroom set, first floor." "First door on the left," she replied, stepping back into the hallway. "Careful with the lamp, I keep pretending it has a place." As he passed her, she moved just enough that the soft fabric of her dress brushed lightly against his arm. Accidental, maybe not. He didn't look back, but he felt the temperature shift. The hallway smelled of cinnamon and something floral, lilac or lavender, faint and inviting. The house was quiet, new boxes lined the walls, unopened. A place half moved into, half emotionally undecided. Thomas moved with quiet precision, his posture straight, every step purposeful. He set the frame and mattress down in the corner of the bedroom without a word, checked for stability, then stepped back into the hall. Maya leaned against the doorframe, sipping her coffee, one leg crossed slightly over the other, her blue hem lifting just enough to make a point. "Do you do this often?" she asked. "Deliver furniture," he replied. "No," she said, voice teasing. "Come into a woman's house and make carrying a bed look like foreplay." He blinked once. She smiled wider. "Well, thank you," she continued, softening. Honestly, she paused, letting her eyes rest on his face. "You're my type, you know that?" The air hung still. Thomas tilted his head slightly, studying her expression, not mocking, not careless, just open. A woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to say it. He exhaled slowly. "I don't think I'm supposed to respond to that." She shrugged. "I'm not asking you to, just thought you should know." Thomas stood still, one hand brushing lightly along the back of his neck. "You always this direct?" "I don't have time for indirect," she said, finishing her coffee. "Life's too short, you want coffee?" He hesitated. "It's the good kind," she added. "From a place 2 blocks over, local roast, strong, no sugar." "I have another stop in 15, he said. She gave a half smile. "Suit yourself, but I make a mean second cup." He nodded once, no commitment, but not a refusal. As he turned to leave, she called out, "Hey, what's your name?" He paused at the top step. Thomas Avery." "Well, Thomas Avery," she said, eyes narrowing playfully. "If that bed creaks tonight, I'm calling you back." He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head as he walked toward the van. Maya stood in the doorway, arms folded, one hip leaning into the frame, watching him go. "Definitely my type," she whispered. And just before the delivery truck turned the corner, Thomas smiled to himself, not because she was beautiful, but because she meant it. It was 4 days later when Thomas Avery found himself back on Maya Williams' porch, though this time there was no delivery ticket, no van, and no one expecting him. He stood at the bottom step, toolbox in one hand, the other brushing lightly against his jeans. He wasn't sure why he came. The official reason was a voicemail Maya left at the store. "Hey, Thomas, the frame creaks a little when I roll over, maybe I assembled it wrong, just thought I'd check before it collapses under me." But the real reason, it wasn't the bed. He knocked twice. Moments later, the door opened and Maya appeared, this time in denim shorts and a loose gray t-shirt tied casually at the waist. Her hair was damp, pushed back in a towel wrap, and her cheeks were flushed with the warmth of a just-finished shower. Well, she said, leaning a shoulder into the doorframe. "Didn't think you'd actually come, you called," Thomas said simply. "I also said maybe," she teased, "but I'm not complaining." She stepped aside and gestured him in. Same room, still squeaky. He passed her without comment, though the scent of her, fresh soap and eucalyptus, lingered longer than he expected. The house was a little less chaotic now, a few pictures hung up, books sorted on makeshift shelves. There was music playing softly from a Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen, Fleetwood Mac. He entered the bedroom and dropped to one knee beside the frame. Within seconds, he had the side panel loose and began tightening bolts with practiced ease. Maya leaned against the door, arms folded. "Do you always fix things that aren't your problem?" Thomas didn't look up. "I don't like unfinished work." She said, watching him. "You're an old soul." "Maybe, I bet you grew up with someone telling you not to leave a job half done." He paused, then gave a slow nod. "My mother and my sergeant." "Military?" she asked, tone shifting slightly. "Army engineers, 7 years. She was quiet for a moment. "Then that explains the way you move, like you've already calculated the weight of the world before you pick anything up." He tightened the last bolt and stood, wiping his palms against his jeans. "You like reading people, don't you?" "I like learning what people don't say." He turned to her, arms relaxed by his side, their eyes met. "This wasn't really about the bed, was it?" he asked. She didn't flinch. "Maybe not." The air between them stretched again, charged, but different now, softer. "So, coffee this time?" "I'm not here for coffee." "I didn't say that's all I was offering." He raised an eyebrow and for a second neither of them spoke. Then Maya broke the tension with a grin. "Relax, Thomas, I'm not trying to seduce you with espresso yet," he chuckled, quiet and unexpected. She patted the space beside her. "Sit down, just for a second, I don't bite." He hesitated, then sat, the bed barely creaked. "I moved here to forget someone," she said suddenly, voice softer. "Someone who made me feel like I had to shrink to be loved." Thomas stayed silent, but his eyes didn't leave her face. "So, when I see someone like you, someone who walks like he doesn't owe the world an apology, I notice." A long pause, then he said, "People only walk like that after learning how to lose." Maya looked at him, then really looked, no flirtation, just presence. "You've lost someone?" "My mom, cancer, and a piece of myself in Afghanistan." The room fell still. Maya reached out and rested her hand on his, just a touch, barely there, but it settled between them like an anchor. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. He nodded, stood up slowly, and started toward the door. "I'll call if the bed creaks again," she said behind him, her tone warm. He paused at the threshold, glanced back. "You don't have to wait for a squeak," he said, then he was gone. Maya sat there for a while, listening to the fading sound of his boots on the porch steps. She wasn't sure what had just passed between them, but she knew it wasn't small. And Thomas, as he walked back toward the truck he'd parked 3 blocks away on purpose, felt the same strange stirring in his chest he hadn't felt since his deployment years ago, hope and the danger that came with it. The late July sun had already started to dip, casting long amber shadows across the quiet neighborhood. Thomas Avery pulled his truck into a side street, not her street, never directly, and killed the engine. He sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, debating if this counted as a visit or something else entirely. He wasn't carrying tools, he wasn't here for a service call, he wasn't even sure if she'd be home. But he got out anyway. Down the block, Maya Williams was trimming her hedges with a pair of shears clearly too big for her small hands. She wore a faded white tank top, khaki shorts, and her hair was tied up high, a red bandana keeping the wisps off her neck. She didn't notice him at first, not until the gate creaked. She looked up, eyes squinting against the golden light. "Thomas," he nodded once evening. "Don't tell me you came to check on the bed again," she teased. "Nope." She set the shears down and wiped her brow with the back of her arm. "Then to what do I owe the honor?" He shrugged, "Just in the area." Maya raised an eyebrow, smiling. "You were in the area 3 blocks away and decided to walk over here in 90 degrees heat, something like that." She motioned toward the porch. "Come on, I made lemonade, it's not store-bought, I promise." He followed her up the steps. The porch had changed slightly since his first visit, a few potted plants, a new wind chime, a second chair had been added beside hers. She handed him a glass, their fingers brushing. "Still no sugar," she said. "You remembered." "I remember everything you don't say," Maya replied. They sat in silence for a minute, watching the breeze stir through the trees. The sound of cicadas pulsed from somewhere deep in the yard. A dog barked 2 streets over. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was easy, natural. "I used to imagine this," Maya said eventually, her voice softer now, "sitting like this with someone, no pressure, no explaining, just being." Thomas sipped from the glass, then asked, "Why didn't it happen before?" She looked out toward the street. "Because I kept choosing people who liked the idea of me, not the reality." He glanced at her. "And what's the reality?" She turned to him, then unblinking, "I'm not simple, I overthink, I feel too much, I say things I shouldn't, and I don't apologize for wanting more than small talk." Thomas nodded slowly. "Sounds honest to me." She studied him for a moment like she wanted to say something deeper, then thought better of it. Instead, she asked, "What about you? What's the part people don't see?" He thought for a long time. "I don't believe I deserve second chances." Maya didn't ask why, she just placed her glass down and leaned forward slightly. "You ever think maybe the second chance shows up when you're not looking?" He didn't answer, not directly. Instead, he stood and walked toward the edge of the porch. The street stretched quiet and golden ahead of them. "You mind if I fix that loose gutter?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "What?" "The one above your bedroom window, it's pulling from the corner." She laughed, a soft, surprised sound. "You don't stop, do you?" "I like when things stay in place." "Well," she said, standing beside him, "maybe not everything has to be fixed right away." He turned toward her, their faces were inches apart, the air between them felt heavier than the heat, still electric. "Maybe," he said. Neither moved, but in that quiet moment, with the sky burning orange above them and the world holding its breath, something settled between them, unspoken, undeniable, and deeply real, not a promise, not yet, but the beginning of something neither of them was ready to name. The restaurant wasn't fancy, in fact, it was the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it, nestled between a laundromat and a used bookstore just off King Street, dim lighting, red and white checkered tablecloths. The scent of garlic and melted cheese wafted from the open kitchen, clinging to the wooden beams like memory. Thomas had picked it because it was quiet, familiar, safe. He sat at a corner table near the window, glancing at the door each time it creaked. He hadn't worn anything special, just a clean button-up, jeans that fit well, and boots polished enough to show he'd tried, but his palms still felt warm, his pulse louder than usual. At 7:14, the door opened, and there she was. Maya Williams didn't wear a dress this time. Instead, she had on high-waisted black jeans and a silky green blouse tucked in loosely, sleeves rolled to the elbows, her hair was pulled to one side in soft waves, her lips tinted just enough to say, "I showed up on purpose." "You clean up nice," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Thomas gave her a slow smile. "You too." They ordered pasta, hers with mushrooms, his with sausage, and shared a basket of garlic knots that disappeared too fast to be polite. The conversation started where most do: work, music, memories of awkward teenage years, but slowly, as the plates emptied and the wine took the edge off, their words dug deeper. "I almost married a guy like you once," Maya said, swirling her glass. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Like me, how?" "Quiet, steady, always fixing things that weren't his to fix." She looked at him, but he wasn't honest, not with me, not with himself. He set down his fork. "And you think I'm different?" "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but you don't pretend, that's rare." He nodded thoughtful. "I've had enough lies in my life to know I don't want to carry anymore." Maya leaned forward, resting her chin lightly on her knuckles. "What do you carry now?" Thomas looked away for a moment as if measuring how much to give, then he said softly, "My mother's voice every time I think about quitting, every time I walk away from something good because I'm afraid it won't last." Her expression changed, not pity, but something closer to recognition. "I carry things, too," she said, "regret, shame, guilt. I shouldn't have." "You ever put any of it down?" "Not until recently," she whispered. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. When they stepped out into the night, the air was cool and dry, the city buzzed in the distance, but their street was calm. They walked side by side, unhurried. At the corner where they'd have to part, Maya stopped. "Tonight was better than I expected," she said. Thomas looked at her, the street lamp catching the glint in her eyes. "I'm glad you came," he said, "even if you almost didn't." She smiled. "I didn't say that." He paused, then asked gently, "So what now?" Maya hesitated, then reached out and lightly touched his forearm. "You walk me home," she said. "That's what happens now." And so he did, not with his usual careful steps, but with quiet certainty. Neither of them said another word. They didn't need to. The porch light was on. It always was now, soft, amber, and constant, like a silent invitation. Only one man seemed to answer. Thomas stood outside Maya's front door just after 9, one hand holding a brown paper bag of leftover cornbread he'd baked, another habit he rarely shared. He didn't knock, not immediately. He simply looked up at the light, that one familiar glow in a world that often felt too dim. Then the door opened before he could lift his hand. "You always this quiet before a visit?" Maya asked, leaning against the frame, barefoot, wearing an oversized navy hoodie that barely reached the tops of her thighs. Thomas gave a small smile. "Wasn't sure if I should knock." "You should always knock," she said, "but you don't have to wait for me to answer." He stepped inside and she gently closed the door behind him. The living room was warm, lights dimmed, a candle flickering on the coffee table. The couch had a folded blanket, 2 mugs already waiting, and the faint sound of Nina Simone's voice drifting from the speaker in the corner. I want a little sugar in my bowl. You're setting a mood, Thomas said. I'm setting a comfort zone, she replied. Mood comes later. They sat close, not quite touching. She reached for the cornbread bag and sniffed dramatically. You made this? I try things, you surprise me. He looked at her. You say that like it's a good thing. It is. Most men my age don't cook, let alone bring baked goods that smell like they should be on someone's grandmother's Sunday table. Thomas laughed, a real, full laugh. Maya rested her head back on the couch, eyes half closed. You know what I like about you? She said. He glanced over. What? You don't chase anything, not praise, not attention, you just show up and stay. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached for his mug and took a slow sip, then gently, you make it easy to stay. They didn't kiss, not then. Instead, they talked about childhood fears, favorite movies, dreams that never made it past paper. At one point, she pulled her knees up under the blanket and tucked her legs close to his, brushing against him like a question she was too cautious to ask aloud. It was nearly midnight when the power flickered briefly and came back. Old wires, Maya said. This house is like me, a little worn, but still holding on. Thomas turned to her. No, he said quietly, you're not worn, you're layered. That was the moment, not dramatic, not cinematic, just honest. Maya's eyes softened. She reached across and placed her hand gently on his chest, right over his heart. Stay tonight, she whispered. His breath caught, not from lust, but the weight of what those words meant. I don't want to mess this up, he said. Then don't. He stayed. They fell asleep on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting lightly over hers. Outside, the porch light remained on, just in case. By morning, the stillness of the room was broken only by the distant hum of lawn sprinklers and the soft creak of wood as the house breathed around them. Maya stirred first, blinking into the filtered sunlight that slipped through the linen curtains. Her head was tucked beneath Thomas's chin, her fingers still resting on his chest like they never left. He was warm, still, steady. She didn't move. She didn't want to. Eventually, Thomas opened his eyes and let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. Didn't dream, he said quietly. That's rare, he nodded. Most nights, it's sand and gunfire. Last night it was just music. Maya smiled, tracing small circles on his shirt with her finger. Well, I'll take that as a win. They didn't speak for a while. There was no rush, no reason to hurry what had already begun to grow slowly, carefully, like something planted deep and allowed to stretch toward light on its own terms. But the world doesn't always wait for permission. At 9:07 a.m., the doorbell rang. Maya sat up, startled. I'm not expecting anyone. Thomas shifted upright, already slipping his boots back on. You want me to? No, she said, already heading toward the door, pulling on a robe. As she went through the frosted glass, she saw a familiar silhouette, Mrs. Kendall from 2 doors down, 80 if she was a day, with opinions like concrete and a voice that could carry through brick. Maya opened the door only halfway. Morning, Mrs. Kendall. The older woman didn't smile. She peered inside with sharp eyes, taking in the blanket on the couch, the mugs, the unmistakable second pair of boots. I saw a man leaving here late last week, she said flatly, and now again. That's becoming quite the pattern, isn't it? Maya kept her face calm, neutral. Is there something you needed? Just looking out for the neighborhood, not judging, Mrs. Kendall added the way only someone clearly judging would. Behind her, Thomas stood quietly in the hallway, arms folded. He heard every word. Maya straightened. I appreciate your concern, but I think I can manage my own life, she said, her voice cool, but not impolite. Mrs. Kendall's lips tightened. Well, I hope you know what you're doing. Maya didn't answer. She just closed the door slowly, deliberately. When she turned around, Thomas was already gathering his things. You don't have to go, she said. I know, he replied, slipping his jacket over one arm, but maybe today you need quiet. Maya stepped forward, stopping him with a hand on his arm. She doesn't speak for me. I know, he repeated, but his voice was softer now. Worried? Does it bother you? She asked. The looks, the questions. Thomas didn't answer immediately. Then only when I feel like I'm making your life harder. You're not, she said firm, "You're making it real." He looked down at her hand on his forearm, then met her eyes. "I'll come by tomorrow if the porch light's on." Maya nodded. "It'll be on," she whispered, and as he walked away, she stood behind the glass, watching him, tall, composed, quietly carrying more than he ever said aloud. She didn't move until he turned the corner and was gone. Then she walked to the porch, unscrewed the light bulb, and replaced it with a brighter one. 2 days passed, no texts, no calls, just quiet. Maya kept the porch light on both nights like she said she would, but the third evening, as the sky turned from blush to violet, she stood barefoot in her kitchen, staring at a stubborn jar of marinara sauce, and thinking about the one man she wanted to open it, not just the jar, her silence, her frustration. The ache she didn't know how to name. The jar wouldn't budge. She slammed it gently on the counter, then laughed at herself, dry, sharp, sad. Fine, she muttered, walking toward the front door. She didn't text, she didn't knock, she just walked 3 blocks in the muggy Charleston heat, still wearing her loose tank top and yoga pants, hair piled into a bun, a jar of tomato sauce clutched like some ironic olive branch. Thomas's truck was in the drive. She climbed the porch steps and rang the bell. The door opened slower than usual, and for a moment she wondered if he'd hesitate. He didn't. He looked like he hadn't shaved, shirt wrinkled, the faint smell of sawdust and old sweat trailing behind him. "I need you," she said, holding up the jar like a white flag. "This thing won't open and it's threatening my entire dinner." Thomas stared at her, then the jar, then her again. "Seriously," he said, very. He stepped aside without a word. She walked inside. The place was sparse, but clean. A stack of lumber leaned against the wall near the door. The living room was simple, neutral couch, no clutter, a military-style duffel bag tucked neatly beneath the coffee table. She noticed everything. He took the jar from her hand, gave it a twist. "Nothing." Maya crossed her arms, grinning. Well, maybe you're not the hero I thought you were." Thomas narrowed his eyes, gripped the lid tighter, then let out a grunt as the seal cracked with a satisfying pop. He handed it back wordlessly. She lifted it like a trophy. "I stand corrected." They both laughed, really laughed, that warm, belly-deep kind that feels like it rinses you from the inside out. "Stay for dinner," she said between chuckles. He tilted his head. "Is that a thank you or a bribe?" "It's pasta and wine, you decide." He hesitated, then nodded once. "All right." They walked back together. No talk about Mrs. Kendall. No tension, just a jar, a joke, and 2 people who realized sometimes healing doesn't come with candles and music. Sometimes it walks beside you with tomato sauce in hand and a stubborn refusal to disappear. That night, they ate spaghetti on her back porch under a strand of crooked string lights. Maya told a story about a college roommate who tried to climb into the wrong dorm window after one too many drinks. Thomas told her about his first job at 16, hauling bricks in the summer heat with a foreman who never smiled once. At some point, she leaned her head against his shoulder. At another, his hand found hers and didn't let go. Nothing was said, nothing needed to be. Later, when he stood to leave, Maya walked him to the gate. "You coming by tomorrow?" she asked. He paused. "You going to need help opening dessert?" She smiled. "Maybe, but I might need help finishing it." And for the first time in a long time, Thomas kissed her, not rushed, not cautious, just right. It was Maya who pulled away first. The kiss had been soft, slow, the kind that lingered even after lips parted, and when she stepped back, her hands still resting on Thomas's chest, she didn't speak right away, neither did he. She just looked up at him, breathing in the moment, memorizing the steadiness in his eyes. "Now what?" she whispered. Thomas didn't answer, not with words. Instead, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was full, alive. Then, almost imperceptibly, he stepped back. "I'll come by in the morning," he said. "You still owe me dessert." But he didn't show up, not the next morning, not the one after that. By the third day, the porch light was still on, but the sun had risen and set without a trace of him. Maya didn't call, didn't text, but every time a truck passed the house, her shoulders stiffened, only to fall again in quiet disappointment. That Friday afternoon, she walked into the small hardware store near downtown, where he'd once mentioned working weekends. She asked for him casually. The man behind the counter looked up from a clipboard to Thomas. He said, took some personal time, left town, said he'd be gone a while. Maya managed a polite nod, then turned and walked out, her chest hollow. Gone a while, no explanation, no goodbye, just gone. That night, she sat alone on the porch swing, blanket over her knees, the plate of leftover lemon pie untouched beside her. The lights along the porch railing flickered softly. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes rang faintly, like memories refusing to be quiet. When her phone buzzed, she didn't move at first, but the name on the screen stopped her breath. Thomas Avery. No words, just a voice memo. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then tapped play. I didn't leave because of you, I left because of me. I told myself I wouldn't mess this up, but I could feel myself starting to. You made me feel like I could be more than what I've always been, like I could be seen without the armor, and that scared the hell out of me. I'll be back, Maya, if you'll still have me. If the light's still on. And the message ended. Maya closed her eyes, then stood. She walked to the front of the house, unscrewed the porch light bulb, and replaced it with a brighter, newer one that wouldn't flicker. She didn't know when he'd return, but she knew this: some goodbyes weren't meant to be finished, some stories waited quietly, patiently, right at the edge of forgiveness. It was a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after the message. The air was crisp with the first breath of fall, the kind of morning that made coffee taste sharper and silence feel heavier. Maya stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the microwave door while her tea steeped, counting seconds not to keep time, but to ground herself. She hadn't heard anything since that voice memo. No calls, no texts, no knocks. But the porch light stayed on every night, every single night. That morning, as she opened the curtain, something unfamiliar interrupted the usual rhythm of her breath. A shadow not imagined, not hoped for, real. A man was standing at the gate, same build, same boots, same worn denim jacket he always wore when he didn't know how to dress for in-between seasons. Her fingers curled tightly into the fabric of the curtain before she let it fall back into place. She didn't rush, she walked slowly, every step down the hallway echoing the weight of those weeks. When she opened the door, Thomas Avery didn't speak, not at first. He just looked at her like someone who'd memorized a place and still couldn't believe it hadn't changed. I didn't want to ring the bell, he said, voice low. Maya leaned her shoulder into the doorframe, eyes unreadable. You were gone. I needed to get out of my own way, he said. I was afraid of letting you see too much. You already did, she replied. That's why I missed you. His jaw tightened and for a brief second she thought he might turn around. But he didn't. He stepped forward, not in bravado, not in apology, but in truth. I'm not perfect, Maya. I might never stop needing to step away when things get too close. She studied him for a long moment. I don't need perfect, she said. I need present. He nodded, swallowing hard. I want to be. There was silence, then Maya turned halfway, opened the door wider. Then come in, she said softly. Before the light burns out. Thomas stepped inside. The warmth of the hallway wrapped around him, faintly smelling of cinnamon and something new. He noticed the jar of unopened jelly on the counter. Waiting, she closed the door behind him, not with a slam, but with a quiet certainty. They didn't kiss, not yet. Instead, they sat on the porch swing like they had that first real night. 2 mugs, 1 blanket, her head against his shoulder. The street was empty, the air steady. Above them, the porch light glowed, steady, unblinking, because some things once left on are never meant to. Brought to you by BUP Stories.